Over the years, I've been fascinated by the legendary pianists of the past. The great names, Moisevich, Joseph Hoffman, and of course Arthur Rubinstein, and there are quite a number of others, Harold Bauer and many others, Leopold Godowsky. Wonderful to really think about these people, these great performers. How did they play? What can we learn from them? How did they play? Well, let's go from one to the other. Moisevich, I was very lucky, as I mentioned in one podcast earlier, I was very lucky to have heard him live and to see how he performed, how he did it. Because I'm a believer that the way we do it is a little bit towards how it's going to sound. Somehow, so there is some sort of connection between our body, the way we use our body, and the way we actually hear and listen to the music. Well, Moisevich was wonderful. He had a bit this sort of approach. Very much a free-falling arm. And the amazing thing is, you could hear in the quality of the chords, the richness. They just sounded so rich. It was as if he played these chords and the resounding in the hall, well, it did something that you can't explain. That's the wonderful thing, isn't it? It's so great not to be able to explain everything. Einstein once mentioned that it's the mystery that gets us further. It's somehow intriguing. How do you get that sound? How it works? The strange thing is, when you don't do that, well, it might sound quite okay, but it hasn't got quite the depth of what I just did before. It sounds much more, I think it has more to do not only with the way we are doing this, it influences your pedaling. The pedaling is if everything is influenced in the right way. You know, isn't it wonderful? It's just like throwing one stone and getting two things, maybe two birds. But that's the way it works. One thing influences the others. So we are really in a line of things which influence each other. And I love that. I love that. And that's something a bit about the playing I could see and hear with Moisevich. He also played, at that time, he played actually the Gaspard de la Nuit from Verheul. And you must remember, this was in the 50s. Amazing to tackle such a great work as the Verheul in those days. I was staggered by that. I was really so impressed. And we can hear so many of the performances of Moisevich on record. And I've made quite a study of them. And in fact, the Tannhäuser, Wagner-Tannhäuser Liszt transcription that he played was done at the last minute. A little bit talking like we're doing things at the last minute. But he did it at the last minute. He didn't plan it too much. Somehow it's in the bones, it's in the body, it's in your whole way of doing things. Anyway, that's Moisevich. And then Joseph Hoffmann. Well, there are some things which I like about Joseph Hoffmann which have got some similarity to Moisevich. He was also we've got 2 films. In fact, I've heard that there's a 3rd film, but no one knows exactly where it is. But anyway, there are 2 films which are still available and still to be watched. We can see them on YouTube, I think, even, and they are of the last movement of the Emperor Concerto of Beethoven. It's an abridged version. It's much shorter because they had a problem with the time. I think it was done in the 1940s or 1930s or something like that. And there's a film of him playing that last 3rd movement, and it's really interesting. The way he absolutely, it just goes, and just the right note, incredible. And with this, and such an incredible flexibility, I think he's a pianist where I would say circles are the way he actually made the music. Circles of movement. If you see the films, you can see him doing that in circles. And of course, he does this all. That prelude of Rachmaninoff. He does that also. And that's done also with the free falling arm, but a very loose wrist. And it's interesting to compare what Joseph Hoffmann says in his books that he's written about piano playing and the questions that were asked of him in those days. And he gives a few answers which are a little bit like what we're talking about. But he was very strict in his study process. He wanted the fingers to be really taking the main accent of all the work. They had to do the main work, and the arms had to be very, very free. You can see that in the films, and the sound that he gets, that's just amazing. That is something, I don't know anyone who can get that same sort of sound as Hoffmann got. It's just unbelievable. You've just got to hear it to believe it. The way he played the 2 piano concertos of Chopin, for instance, I think that's just one of the great things that have occurred in the discography, one of the great performances of all time. But then getting to, Rubinstein, totally different. Here we have a totally different man. The man that really... and so on. No movement. That's interesting. Why? That's one of my things. I think that the greatest performers just did not move. They just kept still. You see it in Moisevich, totally still. What does move is this, but not here. This stays absolutely still. Joseph Hoffmann, same thing. No movement. Just sometimes a small sway, a circle of a sway. That's a little secret because it's a way of loosening things up. Sometimes when we're on stage, we feel a little bit more tense than we should be. And sometimes there are some things we need to do that maybe help loosen things up a little bit. And just that already is enough to do it. You could say you've got to play on both sides of the buttocks. Maybe we could say that. But certainly you've got to somehow be able to get that a little bit in the playing. It certainly helps. I've tried it out, and my students also. So do the same thing, it'll work. But then getting to a few other people. Harold Bauer, there's a film of Harold Bauer playing. And he's playing with a cimbalist, that is a very great violinist of the time. And they're playing the slow movement of the Kreutzer Sonata from Beethoven. And you can see he's doing it, by falling. Unbelievable how loose and easy that is. The sound is incredible, even for those days when we consider the microphones of the 30s were not perhaps the best microphones that we now have today. So there's been a lot of difference in that way also. And, well, there are many others. Leopold Godowsky, I think one of the things that I've often felt the trouble with the work of Leopold Godowsky, of course, there's a big misunderstanding in the performance of the etudes from Chopin from Godowsky. They are, of course, very technical, and that's precisely where the misleading is. That's where it goes wrong, because that's what you've got not to hear too much of. You don't want to hear the technique too much. You want to hear what's behind the technique. And that's what Godowsky was always talking about. He was always saying he wanted his playing to be only from the weight of the arms, nothing more. Just the weight of the arms for everything. It must come through in all fast passages, must come through in everything. That the weight of the arms is given through from key to key. And just like when walking, you use our two legs, they are continually, there's always something in contact with the ground. And somehow that's the same thing with playing the piano. There's always something that's been in contact before the next thing. So they're just a few points. Paderewski, incredible performer. I think, in fact, quite a lot, much too neglected, in fact. He, of course, was a politician. He was actually indeed the Premier of Poland for some time, and had quite a reputation for his political side, which I think there are many different views on. But anyway, that doesn't matter that much. It's the way he played. And my God, he really did play. The one film that we know is just the film of the second Rhapsody of Franz Liszt. Wonderful how he plays that. The way he tackles that. Incredible elegance. And great elegance in the playing. The way he just did this. He didn't want to do it. In fact, he didn't want to make that film. He made it only because he was persuaded to do so at the last minute. Again, a last minute decision. The great things in music seem to often happen by last minute decisions, things that have not been too planned. Well, anyway, I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching. Of course, when you make something of a number of great legendary pianists, you always forget certain people, and there are several I've certainly forgotten. One is, of course, Vladimir Horowitz. And yeah, okay. And so on. The way he plays that. You know, it seems sometimes when you see Horowitz, you think, well, does he know very much about what he's doing? Well, I am convinced he does. He certainly knew what he was doing. And he was able to make the sound of an instrument change and give such contrasts to what he was doing. Some people might not like it, but it doesn't matter, because the fact that he can do it, he was the only one who really in that way could do it in that way. In a certain sense, using the fingers mainly and very flat fingers, which I think is a very important way of performance also, like many other greats of the past. Perlmutter did that also very much. Courteau, let's not forget Courteau. My God, what a great man. The way he played that. These things are so important, I think. I think it's a little bit neglected still today. I think we need to be learning, not just to be playing in one way, but to be performing in different ways. To be studying absolutely 4 or 5, maybe even more different ways of actually approaching the instrument. I think that's important. And we somehow get caught up in that. You see that in many performances that are very good, but it's about not what's very good, is what do you remember for a month or a few years later. That's what it's about. You can hear very wonderful performances, but somehow you forget them within a few days. And then there are very few, but sometimes performances that you seem to not be able to forget. That's what I've had with Benno Moisevich. Actually, Slavomir Richter, another one. Totally different. Aren't they different? My God. The difference between all these pianists is just so colossal. It's just mind-boggling to think how could they be all so different. It's just playing a black and white instrument, you know, that an instrument can actually give its heart and seal to these different ways of playing. I love this. This is really inspiring. It should be so inspiring for young people.
Onda.
There's also another one I forgot, and that was one of my teachers, the one that I learned quite a few things from. I studied with him in the 60s, and we studied the second concerto of Brahms. And he was playing the second piano part and giving discussion about the playing and telling me what I loved about Geza Under, and that's often forgotten. People know him often for his Mozart concerto performances on record, where there are some very fine performances amongst them also, extremely good performances. But one of the things that I think he was really great in, he was actually a troubadour. He actually played the music as if it was being spoken, and he spoke the music. And you can hear that in some of the recordings. You can hear it, that he really has an amazing singing quality. In fact, his way of playing, if anything, went back very much to the bel canto singers at the turn of the century. They are very well worth studying. Battistini is one to be studied, and there are quite a few, Beyonce and a few others, were Tetrasini. They are very great singers of the time. And they should be studied, really. We can learn such a lot from those performances in these days. Yes, well, if I think a little bit longer, I'll remember a few more. But there are so many that have been so wonderful and great performers. And I think we can learn such a lot from these players.